the Titans, the Mount Rushmore of players we all know the names of. Tom Brady, Peyton Manning, Aaron Rodgers. Then there are the Giants hoping to join this group. Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson. Nonetheless, you can't forget about these new guys hoping to dethrone everything those that came before them created and blaze their own trail into NFL history. Joe Burrow, Justin Herbert, Mac Jones. Men that won't let you forget who they are. And if you do, they'll be more than happy to remind you. This is the show where we'll talk about all those legacies and so much more. We'll follow these storylines from the beginning of the season all the way to the climax of the Super Bowl. We'll see giants fall and watch new men who you never expected to take over stand tall. Through adversity and victory, the NFL has it all, and we'll cover every minute of it here. No buts about it.
Hello, from a dorm room in Ohio. This is Josh Butts, host of No Buts About It. We're here with Chris, and for the first time ever, Andrew Gillis, the Bengals beat reporter for Cleveland.com and part of the Strictly Stripes podcast. Thank you, Andrew, for joining us, and we appreciate you taking time to come on the show.
No problem. Thanks for having me on, guys.
Okay.
So I'm just I just wanted to spit this one right at you just because, I was actually talking about it with Josh real quick before you joined on. So, as much as I don't, follow the Bengals too much, I do know about the current running back situation going on. And I know this was touched on your podcast earlier in the week and whatnot about Joe Mixon and the concussion protocol. Do you think that since Pirine is, producing so well and, Joe Mixon is obviously the starter and he's planning on coming back this week, would you split time with Joe Mixon and Pirine? Would you give Mixon the opportunity to just go 90% and have Pirine go 10? Or I know that in the past, I know Mark Ingram, Alvin Kamara had a really good 50-50 connection back in 2017. So I just didn't know, since he's just playing so well, what do you think from a perspective for the Bengals? What do you think that they should do?
Yeah, I mean, if I was running the show, it kind of sounds like they're going to go back to at least something similar to what they had before Mixon went down. If I was running the show, I'd probably have a 60-40 split, maybe where you lean on a guy a little bit more. They've really liked what Samaje Perine's done in terms of his third down ability. Brian Callahan, their offensive coordinator, has really kind of praised his pass blocking. Some of the offensive line have kind of done that too. So you don't want to take a guy like that off the field. And in the weeks since Mixon's been out, there really hasn't been a noticeable drop off. You haven't gone, oh man, this team really is hurting at running back. They don't have a guy that you can reliably give the ball to. So, what I would do is, and this is me speaking, obviously, I think I would kind of go 60-40 with Mixon, but keep in mind that, what Pirine has done. I thought he was just really, really good against the Chiefs. So if you get to a point where, Mixon is playing, 60% and Pirine's outperforming him with those snaps, then you can maybe start to change things up a little bit. But you're going to need two backs. They haven't really shown, that they trust Trevion Williams or Chris Evans really all that much. Chris Evans doesn't have a rush attempt this year. Trevion Williams has 5. So to me, I know that's a long-winded way of answering the question, but to me, you're going to need both guys. So I would start with Mixon, but I really wouldn't lean on one super, super heavily down the stretch because you're going to need both of them if you want to go on a playoff run.
Yeah, that's what I would hope you would say, just because I definitely don't want them to give up on Pirine, because especially after, I know it's been a couple weeks, but after that Steelers crushing performance by him, I knew that there was something about that guy, and I'm glad that he's getting the opportunity to play. So,
kind of on that same note, do you kind of league wide as well? Do you think that the bell cow kind of hammering the ball with one guy is dying out in the league? I know Derrick Henry obviously is doing well for the Titans, but it seems like with Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt, now Mixon and maybe P. Ryan, it seems we've got more of these divided backfields going on. Do you think that'll become more popular?
Yeah, for sure. But I don't know if it's. I think there's multiple things that go into that. I think, one of the things that goes into that is, go back 30 years, when the Giants, or excuse me, when the Cowboys and the Vikings made that huge Herschel Walker trade. Go back and look at the GM of the Vikings talking about how, great teams all have one thing in common, a great running back. Like, imagine a coach or a GM saying that today, right? So I think that's just kind of the way that the league has gone, that it's a passing league. You need to invest at quarterback and receiver. And then depending on what kind of tight end you can get, tight end, you got a pass block for that guy. So I think running back has just gotten devalued because of the nature of the game, because of how much the position just kind of churns you out. I mean, people talk about Joe Mixon like he's 100 and he's 26. Like everybody kind of acts like, oh my God, is Joe Mixon at the end? And he's my age. He's 26. So it's like, that's kind of crazy. So I think there's that. I think that it is, and I think that what that kind of does is, if you're not investing in a running back, and I know the Bengals drafted Joe Mixon in the second round, but like, if you're a team that isn't going to invest heavily in a running back, you're going to draft a running back. I think of a team like the Commanders. You draft Antonio Gibson in the third round, then you draft Brian Robinson 2 years later in the third round. Like, if you're not investing heavily in those guys, then I think that you don't really have a reason to give them the ball. But there's still going to be bell cows. There's still going to be guys that Jonathan Taylor, if you have Jonathan Taylor, you're not going to split 60-40. You got to give that man the ball all game. Like, if you have Derrick Henry, you got to give that man the ball all game. So, I would say the same thing, assuming Bijan Robinson is what he's been promised. So I think it's just one of those things where the nature of the game has changed, and the different ways that teams are built have changed, and that kind of lends itself to different personality structures and personnel structures. So to me, there's a couple different ways to look at that, but the number one thing is that it's just it's the number one thing is that there's more than number one thing. So there will always be those guys, though.
Yeah. Okay. That's good to hear. And I believe Samaje Perine was drafted the same year as Joe Mixon too. I think they were both 2017. So
yes, they were, because Perine got drafted by Washington in the 4th round, and then
right.
Mixon was the second rounder.
So the age gap there can't be too big.
Yeah, Perine's only a year older.
Oh, he's older. See, okay.
Perine was born in 95, so he's a year older. But if you really want to get down to it, he's like 9 months older or something like that. It's not significant.
Right. I'm just saying, if Mixon is 100, Perine's 101.
Right. Like, yeah, that's the thing. And it's kind of funny because, like, there are guys that buck that trend. I mean, like, I just watched Mark Ingram play on Monday Night Football the other night. Like, he's been playing since I can remember. I remember him at Alabama when I was like a kid. So, there are guys that can handle that just physically. They're literally, they're that, the cliche quote, they are just built different. But a lot of guys, once you hit like 28, 29, it's tough sledding.
Right. So the other big news that came, I think I saw this on your Twitter first, and then later saw the Bengals post it. But Kevin Huber has been dropped to the practice squad, or waived and then signed to the practice squad. Drew Chrisman is now the official punter for the team. Huber's been with the team for 14 seasons. He's been in Cincinnati his whole life. I'm pretty sure he was born in Cincinnati, raised in Cincinnati. This was a debate in the preseason. So what do you think the ultimate reason was at this point to now go with Chrisman over Huber? And do you think Kevin Huber's just going to retire at the end of this season?
You go with the guy who's going to win you games. Brian Callahan got asked that today. Like, considering it was about Joe Mixon, but it was considering everything that he's done for you and considering what he's meant and blah, 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 blah. Would you feel comfortable going to Samaje Perine out of the backfield? And Callahan said, yeah, we got to win. And if you're in a position where Kevin Huber's not getting the job done as well as Drew Chrisman, then that's just what you have to do. I mean, there's a small sample size. Chrisman's only had a third of the punts or something like that Huber's had, but he's punting for 8 yards more on average. He's already had, I was looking this up the other day, 5 of his 9 punts have been inside the 20-yard line. So it's just one of those situations where you look at it and you go, okay, so we have this guy who's playing pretty well, and we think that Kevin's not doing what the standard should be, so we're going to go with Drew. And credit to Kevin. Everybody said that he handled it super well, because you could kind of tell what was coming. You only get 3 practice squad call-ups. Chrisman was out of those 3, so you could kind of sense this was on the horizon. So yeah, I mean, I don't know about the future for Huber. We'll have to see. It just kind of depends on what he wants. I mean, like you said, he was born in Cincinnati, went to high school here, went to UC, then he then he gets drafted by the Bengals. Like he is a Cincinnati guy through and through. I don't know what his future is going to be. I'm sure there are a lot of professions in this town where he could kind of name it. If he wants a job with the organization, if he wants a job coaching with the organization, if he wants to talk about it, if he wants to just retire and live in, some lake house somewhere, he can do that too. There's a couple different things he can do. But I mean, when you've been as successful as he has for such a long time, you kind of earn that. So you keep him around certainly for the end of the year, because the last thing you want to do is be getting ready to play the Bills on Monday Night Football, and Drew Chrisman gets food poisoning. I don't know. You always want to have those guys around on the practice squad just in case, because if you watch the Bengals Steelers game, which actually both of you guys certainly did, if one of you guys is a Bengals fan and one of you guys is a Steelers game, if you don't have a specialist on board, like somebody that can snap, you are in deep trouble. So
yeah,
I miss Clark Harris. Okay, yeah, I mean, I know the primary argument for keeping Huber was like, he's been around for so long, we can't just ditch him. But also, like you said, Drew Chrisman is playing well right now. He's playing better. So that makes sense. I'm glad the Bengals didn't just like ditch him and leave him on the waiver wire. They did kind of put him on the practice squad for someone to maybe eventually pick up, but they will have him around if needed, like you said, if Drew Chrisman gets food poisoning.
Exactly.
The other big thing this season was Hayden Hurst coming to the team.
Right.
I was a huge CJ Uzama fan. I loved what he did for the locker room. I didn't think he was necessarily the greatest tight end in the league, but I was like, what it appears he brings to the locker room is worth bringing him back. I wasn't sure about Hayden Hurst because he's been with the Ravens. He's been with the Falcons. I didn't know if he was going to be what he is now. He's been super good for us, in my opinion. How have you seen him kind of work with the culture in Cincinnati, and how do you think his injury is going to affect the offense this weekend, since he's presumably going to be out?
Yeah. So when I first got into the NFL, I covered the Ravens. So I covered the Ravens in 2019. So I was, I knew who Hayden was. I covered that monster of a tight end room Baltimore had with Mark Andrews and Nick Boyle. And obviously Hayden was in there. And, I look at Hayden as a guy who had never really been given, not a fair shake, but who had never really been given an opportunity to kind of take and seize a role. Like 2018, he was their first round pick. Like he was their first round pick before they picked Lamar Jackson. And then in the third round, they picked Mark Andrews. 2019, he was kind of the same thing where he's on the bench because you have to keep Nick Boyle, who was probably before his injury the best blocking tight end in the sport. And then you have Mark Andrews. You just can't run 3 tight end sets the whole game. So then he gets traded to Atlanta. and he has a really good year. He gets like 90 targets, one of the top receivers on the Falcons. Then they draft Kyle Pitts. So I kind of knew what he was coming into the year, and I knew that he was going to be motivated. And if you actually kind of look at the numbers purely in terms of targets and catches, he gets about the same amount of targets and catches as Tyler Boyd does, which surprises some people. It's just that, Tyler Boyd, where he makes his catches, he has more of an explosive threat, and he makes his catches farther down the field. So those yardage numbers for Boyd kind of stack up. But, Joe Burrow really, really likes Hayden Hurst in terms of finding him underneath, finding him on those third down plays, those red zone plays. And that's kind of what Hayden has said, that all he ever wanted was to be relied upon in an offense, and he's getting that. So for Hayden, you have to feel good for the guy who, he says I remember it was after the Dolphins game, I was asking him a couple questions, and he said, I feel like I died and went to heaven. So you feel good for a guy like that. The injury is interesting because calf injuries can be notorious pains in the butt. So we'll have to see kind of what that is. Especially now like Mitchell Wilcox is their number 1 tight end, and he came into the year as their number 3 tight end because you had Drew Sample and you had Hayden Hurst. So I like Mitchell Wilcox. I was watching some of the game back from the Chiefs game. He's a pretty good blocker, which you wouldn't really expect from kind of looking at where he came from and some of the numbers that he had in college. But he's a really good blocker. And I think that this offense is unique in the fact that you don't need a tight end to be the center point. Like if a tight end going down in like Kelsey going down is obviously a little bit different, but like a tight end going down in Baltimore means way more than it does in Cincinnati, where it's okay, well, we have T. Higgins and Jamar Chase and Tyler Boyd anyway. So it's a big loss. It takes away an underneath option, but I think for as long as he's out, the Bengals will be able to kind of manage it.
Beautiful. Okay, so you mentioned him as well. How does the culture change around the offense when Jamar Chase is in? Because I wasn't at the Chiefs game, but I heard they introduced him after Joe Burrow.
Right.
And I know Joe Burrow is usually the last guy out of the tunnel, but this time it was Jamar. So the team recognizes Jamar as a huge deal. How do you feel like when you're in the locker room with them and he's able to play or he's coming off of a big game, what do you kind of feel and see with the players when Jamar's playing?
Well, I think that there's a confidence even when he's not playing, but when you have a guy like that in the lineup, I mean, guys were talking about this after the game, like he can take, like T. Higgins said, he can take a 3-yard pass and take it 70 yards for a touchdown. And Ted Karras kind of said the same thing. You can catch the ball and he's gone. So, I think that there's just an element of, okay, like that we have another home run threat on our offense. And like, a lot of respect to like Trent Irwin, who played, pretty well, I thought, in relief. Like he's just not Jamar Chase. There's right. Maybe a handful of guys around the NFL that you'd be like, okay, I can put Jamar Chase in the same league as him. And that's what I always say about T. Higgins. Like I kind of feel bad for T. Higgins in a way because I think he's the number 1 receiver in the league who just happens to be on an offense with Jamar Chase. So I think that when he's there, there's just a feeling of, okay, now we're fully operational here. This Death Star is ready to fire. Like you can move on that. So I mean when he, like I said, when he's there is just the defenses have to play him different. You number 1 corners are going certain places. Safeties have to change up what they're doing. So to me, there's just a feeling of, they're, like I said, they're confident without him, but there is a feeling of just not overconfidence, but they know what Jamar is, and it doesn't matter what kind of offense he's in. If you have that guy compared to not having that guy, it's a whole different ballgame.
Yeah, Trent Irwin did so well, though. He was such a shock. I remember I went to the Pittsburgh Bengals game in Pittsburgh, and Irwin got that touchdown, and the Steelers fans were like, who is that? Is Jamar playing? Who is that guy? I was like, no, that's Trent Irwin. That's our boy. And I was doing the money thing, and then Jamar did it after T. Higgins touchdown. He got a flag. I didn't get flagged when I did it. So I was glad to see it. Should we be worried about Jamar going too far on those penalties? Because now he's got 2 against the Steelers, but Bengals fans love both of them.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I mean, I'm one of those guys who's like, unless it becomes a problem, like unless he starts getting thrown out or it takes him out of his game, then I don't have a problem with it. I think sports are fun that way.
Right.
Like I remember I was covering that Ravens Titans game in 2020 where the Titans danced on the midfield logo and then beat them in Baltimore in the playoffs, and then the next year they did the same thing. Ravens run out to midfield, lose in regular season, and then they beat them in Nashville, and then like the whole sideline comes running off. Like everybody was like, "How disrespectful!" I'm like, "This is pretty funny." Like, come on, like you gotta have some fun with it. So, I think sports are cool like that because I don't like I covered hockey before, and hockey's fun. The guys are really great, but like, goodness gracious, man. Like sometimes you get these players, oh, what do you got to do? Oh, we got to get pucks deep, grind guys out, play our game, and blah, 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 blah. It's the same answer every time. So like you can't have it both ways where like if you want guys to show emotion on the field in press conferences, you want guys to be themselves. And if that's who Jamar is, then let him do his thing because he's obviously very good at it. So don't take him out of it.
I agree. I hate the taunting penalty. I feel like it's the most randomly thrown penalty in the
Right.
NFL because guys do stuff after a touchdown no matter what.
Right.
And
yeah, like taunting has a place in high school and like maybe in college. But like if you get to the NFL, I genuinely don't care. Like I genuinely don't care if you do like the TO pull a Sharpie out of your sock thing. Like dude, I don't care. Like who cares? Do it.
Yeah, I just feel like they're very random. They affect the team, but they're so funny most of the time that it's like
Right.
I don't even care unless like you said they get thrown out.
Right.
I know you talked about this on your podcast with the other hosts. Lou Anarumo is the only DC or defensive coordinator in the NFL to beat Patrick Mahomes 3 times. I think that's right. I can't think of another one.
Sounds right.
I can't think of. I tried to look it up and I couldn't really find anything that covered it. I think that's correct. He's the only defensive coordinator in the NFL to beat Patrick Mahomes 3 times. All 3 of those times were within this calendar year. And what are the odds you think in your opinion? What are the odds he starts getting calls to be a head coach?
That's always tough to predict because some guys and I don't mean he can't do it. I mean I'm just saying some guys are just defensive guys. Some guys are some guys are just made to be a high level coordinator. It's not saying like I said he won't or he can't, but the way that the league is going, it's a heck of a lot more attractive to take and I know this is a controversial topic, but like Eric Bieniemy, it's you take a hot shot offensive coordinator who can get your quarterback right, who can get your offense right, over taking the guy who's like, we're going to win with defensive discipline and everything like that. Like that doesn't fly like it did 10, 15 years ago. I mean, Lou has never been a head coach. He was like a full-time head coach. He was like, I believe, an assistant head coach back in college. But then, you look at kind of his past. He was a defensive backs coach for the Giants. You can kind of go down the line, and his background is with defensive backs. That's just not something I don't think you see a ton of in terms of coaching across the league. So, for now, he's done a great job. I think, like we said, one of the things that he did really well and that he does really well against Patrick Mahomes is he mixes up his looks. You can't let a guy like Patrick Mahomes get comfortable, and he said this before the game. If you're talking about a guy who hits fastballs 500 feet, if he sees fastball and knows fastball's coming, that thing's gone. So you have to kind of confuse him. You have to make him second guess what he's seeing, and they've done a really good job of that.
Yeah, I mean, so I know you just started covering the Bengals this year, I believe. If you go back to like 2020 in the Bengals subreddit, when Burrow had just gotten to the team, everyone was like, fire Zach Taylor, fire Lou Anarumo. really was fire Lou Anarumo, because some people were still like, oh, okay, let's give Zach Taylor a chance,
Right.
But Lou Anarumo was out the door in some people's minds. Now he is like the best thing since sliced bread. And I'm so happy for him that he's gotten that far. And I don't want to lose him as a defensive coordinator. So I know guys like there's been a tendency for offensive coordinators to get into the head coaching position. Nathaniel Hackett is the most recent one I can think of. Went from Green Bay to Denver. Now he's not doing well as the head coach, in my opinion. But I'm glad to hear that there is a chance we can keep Lou Anarumo as our defensive coordinator, because I think he's done a great job, and I've always supported him. Yeah. Final question, unless Chris has another question, but my final question is, you used to cover the Baltimore Ravens, as you alluded to before. What is it like going from one fan base to a rival fan base in Cincinnati, and why are the Bengals better?
That's good. I like that. I'll start with the first part of that. It's unique because I think you kind of need to understand where that franchise is coming from. When I showed up to cover the Ravens, Lamar, the running back jokes were there, and they still kind of are there, but they're tongue in cheek now. But back in the day, this was fresh off of their playoff loss to the Chargers, where they looked awful, and specifically Lamar looked awful. I remember the narrative was the Chargers put 6 defensive backs on the field. That's how you stop the Ravens now. There's the kryptonite, and it was over. And there was just so much stupidity. And I think that you kind of have to you have to put yourself in the mindset of where the fans are. So with the Ravens, it was, okay, everything is Lamar centric, and everything is, everything has to be, okay, what is this offense? What is Lamar? Well, and then you go to Cincinnati, and they're a play away, third, whatever you want to say, from the Super Bowl, winning the Super Bowl. And when the Ravens were not, they were coming off a year where they were a playoff team, but nobody really thought that they were going to be that. I showed up in Cincinnati, and it was Super Bowl, I wouldn't say Super Bowl or bust, because they didn't go all in like the Rams did, but it was, if you don't make the Super Bowl, it's a disappointment. So it was kind of similar in that regard, where it was kind of similar in just the way that people talked about the team. After a certain point with the Ravens, it was like, okay, we need to go to the Super Bowl now. And I think every fan base kind of has that. Like you mentioned, the stuff with Fire Lou, every fan base kind of has that, oh, we lost this week, our offensive coordinator's the dumbest man that has ever lived. We won this week, why hasn't he been extended yet? Every fan base has that. But in actuality, it helped, I think, that they were in the same division. It helped that I actually covered a Bengals game in Burrow's rookie year, and I got to see how bad they were. Oh, good Lord. They played in Baltimore in 2020, and the 2019 game was bad. The Bengals ran the opening kickback. And then after that, they just got housed. And then in 2020, it was like watching Joe Burrow try to fight a war by himself, because he had no help. So it's kind of cool being able to see that progression. So I think that helped. Why Bengals fans are better? That's a good one. I don't know the answer. That's a tough one, because when I will say, and with all due respect, crab is better than Skyline chili. So I can't give the nod to Cincinnati on that one.
I'm from Indiana, so that's not gonna get me. But yeah.
Crab. Okay, so Indiana. I don't know. I think you stumped me on that one. I'm not sure.
I mean, I'm just saying, Bengals fans, I don't really have anything against the Ravens. I wish you had covered the Steelers before, because I have more against the Steelers. Chris,
All right.
you said
Yeah.
on the last episode that you were on the edge of not being a Steelers fan anymore
Okay,
because of
listen. Okay. Well, fair. Okay. In fairness, it had nothing to. The problem is there's a different culture with Steelers fans in the fan base than there are, I feel like, in most of the other fan bases within the AFC North. I feel like just coming from a Steelers fan, I've gone to plenty of Steelers games where the toxicity like really runs rampant in these fans for no reason, especially even whether we're winning the game or losing. So I get really frustrated as a Steelers fan because from our standpoint, I mean, I know it happens in most fan bases, but I feel like one game where I think the Steelers lost to the Miami Dolphins, like it was like 16-10 or 17-10 or whatever. And like Kenny Pickett couldn't finish off the drive to get us the touchdown. They just like more or less like they were like, oh, Kenny Pickett sucks. Like everybody on the entire team sucks. Like this just is terrible. And I'm like, just give it a chance. This is like Kenny's like second starting game. Like, so yeah, I was getting a little frustrated with Steelers fans more or less. So
Yeah,
I
mean, those cities are fun. You know, like I've always wondered what it would be like to cover a team in like Philly, or to like cover, like to cover a team where it's like Alabama football. I don't know, like something where like, because like with all due respect to like certain professional, it's just different. Like covering the Rams is, you have to approach it differently than you cover the New York Giants. Like there's just a difference in the fan base, in the way that the league is, in the way. So you know, it'd be cool like having a fan base that is so like ravenous for information about the team, that wants to engage, that is always down for a conversation. It would be problematic, like if you're covering the Steelers and somebody's just like, I think Kenny Pickett's better than Dan Marino, and it's like, okay, well, maybe let's hit the brakes. But you know, I think that it's give and take. But I mean, the like Pittsburgh fans are like, you got to give them their credit. They're intense. Like when they play Renegade, man, that's so like the fourth quarter when they play Renegade, that's so cool.
It is definitely like, in my opinion, like one of my favorite experiences of Steeler games. Right. I mean, granted, I grew up like also with like University of Pittsburgh, so where Kenny Pickett came from. I would go to so I would go to games and I would watch like when Kenny Pickett would go in for the fourth quarter or whatever. They would play Sweet Caroline, and so it's a very similar vibe at, well, then it was Heinz Field, but now at Acrisure Stadium, where like the Steelers have Renegade at the fourth quarter, and then Pitt has Sweet Caroline at the beginning of like the fourth quarter and stuff. So it's definitely it definitely is intense. I will say that sometimes it just, in my opinion, can be a little too much, but as you said, it can be very, very admirable. But I do have one other thing relating to just like the AFC North, just in general, with like the rest of the season coming up. The Bengals and Ravens are both 8-4. I think the Ravens earlier in the season beat the Bengals 19-17, I think. Last game of the season against the Bengals, or last game for the Bengals this season is against the Ravens. Bengals have a pretty rough couple of weeks. I know you guys have Buffalo and stuff. I mean, obviously you guys beat Kansas City and whatnot and stuff, but with Tom Brady and, you know, Patriots playing, you know, here and there football and whatnot, how do you think the Bengals will do in the AFC North? And do you think that the Bengals can win the division, especially with like Lamar Jackson out?
Yeah, up until this past week, I thought the Ravens were going to win the division, and then the Ravens laid another clunker against the Broncos, who suck, and Lamar got hurt. So I think that the Bengals are going to win the division now. The only thing that is interesting here, that is worth monitoring, is that the Ravens already have at worst, they're going to get a push to the divisional tiebreaker, because if the Bengals win that last game of the season and they have the same record at the end of the season, then it goes to a divisional tiebreaker. Well, the Bengals are 1-3 and the Ravens are 2-0. So if it gets to a point where, you know, if the Ravens win this Sunday against the Steelers, if the Ravens go 2-2 in their divisional games to end the season, they are guaranteed to have the tiebreaker over the Bengals. And with who the Ravens play down the stretch, like, that's really interesting, because I know they play the Falcons, They play the Steelers. I actually think they played the Steelers twice, if I'm not mistaken.
This weekend, and then I think it's on New Year's Day. So yeah,
Right. So like if you split those Steeler games and then you win one of Browns or Cincinnati, you're gonna get the division. So you kind of run out of numbers there to make it work. So the Bengals have to keep pace with them, because it is interesting because we're talking about the Bengals right now. Like, okay, they beat the Chiefs, okay, they beat the Titans, okay, they beat the Dolphins. They have these tiebreakers over a lot of these teams, and they still play Buffalo. So you can talk about that for the number one seed in the whole conference. But then we're also kind of like, okay, well, you have to win your division first, because I'm curious what's going to happen, because if the Ravens win 2 or 3 in a row, it doesn't take much of an imagination to see the Bengals losing to, Cleveland at home, a team that's killed them in the past, or losing to Tampa Bay. Tampa Bay is not very good, but you go on the road and then you have a short week in New England. Like, if you lose one of those games and the Ravens, they beat up on their schedule, it's going to be tough. So I think the Bengals actually are going to win the division, but the Bengals don't have as much room they have less room for error than I think the standings would show right now.
yeah, I wanted to agree with that, just because I definitely think, like, just with the Ravens and stuff, not that I think Lamar Jackson's going to be out for multiple weeks. I don't think his injury is going to last that long. I definitely can see a definite option for the Bengals to take that first place. And I know the Steelers, and definitely not the Browns, we're not catching up to no second place or anything like that.
Yeah. The Browns and the Steelers are exclusively fighting for the 7 seed, which I don't know how likely that is, but we'll see.
I'm not. I mean, the Steelers are so wishy-washy. I mean, the Browns threw in Deshaun Watson, and there was all that, but I mean, it's very up in the air for the 7th seed. But I definitely think I definitely can see the Bengals definitely taking over the division. I just wanted to make sure I was on the same page.
Yeah, right.
Well, thank you so much, Andrew, for being on the show. I really enjoyed this. I hope you enjoyed this, taking the time out of your day.
Yeah.
Love to have you back sometime. Probably not soon, but I'd love to have you back soon. I just know you're busy. I've seen you on Twitter. If you're not following this guy on Twitter, go follow him on Twitter, because I usually see your tweets about stuff before the Bengals post it. So
that's the highest compliment I could ever get.
No, you're great. What's your Twitter handle? I don't have it
at Andrew_Gillis 70.
Okay, and do you have any other social media you want to plug real quick?
Not that I post on enough. I mean, if you want to find my stuff, it's at cleveland.com/Bengals. That's where myself and then all of our other Bengals work, from Muhammad Ahmad and Mike Neislick, goes. So those are the 2 places. But like you said, you want to catch the stuff before the Bengals tweet it, I guess follow me, apparently.
Yeah, you were doing great, especially today. Everything I saw was from you. So as for me, follow me on Twitter, Josh_Butts_2001, and the Instagram for the show, NoButts_show. Thank you once again, Andrew, for coming on the show. Really enjoyed having you. Love to have you back again sometime. That's going to be all for today.